The Good Fight just concluded its bold, brave, and daring fourth season in which it explores power, politics, corruption with a real distinct sense of urgency. I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby. I'm here with creators Robert King and Michelle King. Robert and Michelle, Diane Locker bemoans the state of American society when she declares, "This is America. There is a special effing off-ramp for the well-connected." That's the perfect summation, I think, to what this season meant to me. Why did you decide to focus on the disparity between the powerful and the powerless?
Because of what's been going on in the news, it's just been shockingly obvious that things are not the same for those that are connected to those that aren't.
You're looking at today where Flynn, the judge in the Flynn case, where the Department of Justice is trying to let him go, even though he confessed to perjury, which is, okay, then he confessed he's guilty. What are you doing? And the judge is just pulling back on that now. So, I mean, the bottom line is this seems to be, I would think, like a headline for the current zeitgeist. Beyond the pandemic and the protests, it is that there is this kind of guardrails gone in the law where some people seem to be given this pass.
Yeah, episode 2 is when we really start to get a handle on this mystery memo 618 that you both employ as your kind of narrative device to kind of start to explore this idea. A corrupt judiciary is letting powerful people not comply with subpoenas or judicial rulings. Geez, where does that ring a bell? It's so prescient to what we're dealing with now. How do you become so prescient on things that are going on and this breakdown in democracy that we are actually seeing?
Well, we have a spectacular writers' room of 8 writers other than ourselves, and they are news junkies. They listen to every podcast. They read every publication, and the first hour of every day in the writers' room typically is just talking about the news of the day.
When we were doing 22 a year on The Good Wife, you could be a little more scattershot with your attention, like do this episode about this problem, that, Bitcoin here, a little bit of racism on the internet over there. But when you're doing 10, or in this case, this year of 7, you're really trying to look for themes in the zeitgeist that seem to matter and that you could have cross-pollinate between episodes so that you're really of the moment, I guess.
Yeah. That's why there's a sense of urgency. Like, you don't waste a single minute on this show. Every minute counts, and that's why we kind of we love what we get on The Good Fight. Speaking of episode 1, so we return back to the show, and episode 1 is this clever standalone episode in which Diane finds herself in this alternate universe where Hillary is president. And the Me Too movement didn't happen, and Garland is on the Supreme Court. It was like a soothing balm, a fantasy fever dream. It was so wonderful to be in that world, and then it was ripped away from us. Talk us through where that came from and whether you were happy with the way it came out.
I'll speak to, I was really happy with the way it came out. I think Christine was as fabulous as she has ever been. Brooke Kennedy did a terrific job directing it. I thought there was great wit to it. It was everything I hoped. Yeah,
what was good is it's not dry. It's very funny, and it really goes to the Christine Baranski that was one of Mike Nichols' favorite actresses for comedy. You really got hints of that before with her slamming her head against a closet wall and things like that. In this episode, it was this little farce around a thought experiment. A thought experiment is, okay, the show bitches a lot about Trump, what it would be if Hillary were president. And there's a little bit of liberal fantasy wet dream about it where all the problems of the world are solved, cancer is on its way to being cured. But the obsession is still on Benghazi and the travel office scandal from the old Clinton year. And then, what would happen with Me Too? What would happen with some of the powers that be? When you look at who Weinstein was, he was enabled by a lot of people you think of as liberal heroes because he kept giving money to all those causes. So it was just an attempt to give a thought experiment of the goods and bads.
And forcing ourselves to be honest that even if things had gone the way we would have hoped, there would have been negative consequences.
Yeah, see, I had never thought of it that way because I live in my little bubble, my liberal bubble, where everything is so bad right now because it is, and how it would be so utopian if Hillary was president or someone else, and yet you were able to kind of point out, hang on a second, reality means that there's going to be a lot of shit that will go down, even depending on whoever is president. And I just love that you're able to. You're coming from a liberal perspective, but you're not stupid enough just to think that your lens is the perfect one. Let's talk about that, because sometimes you might be criticized for whataboutism. Imagine if you had said the things about Trump that you said about Obama, you'd be in so much trouble. But you don't see it that way, do you? You come from a perspective, but you like to see both sides if you can.
I think we satirize the left as often as we do the right.
I think that comes from, if we want to get pretentious, and why wouldn't we? If you go to Jonathan Swift, look at Tale of a Tub. It's not just a satire. We often think of satire as a missile directed at one target, when in fact, a lot of what's fun about satire is, and I just probably killed anybody wanting to see our show because I use the S word, satire. But what is fun of our show is you can make fun of kind of all views of something. Kind of what is good for the goose is good for the gander. Oh my God, I'm going to go through some bad metaphors now and some bad.
Love it.
But the idea that it's not only one political bent or one idea that should be satirized. You should kind of look at both as being sometimes equally suspect.
Yeah. This season ended on a riveting old school mystery about who killed Jeffrey Epstein. It was sensational the way it ended. I won't spoil it in case anyone hasn't seen it yet, but it's worth your time. The season starts with an assessment of Harvey Weinstein and ends on Epstein. So you had sex offender bookends on this particular season. What were you going for on that Epstein episode? Because it was so unexpected, and I really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you for enjoying it. It really, of course, was not meant to be a bookend. It was meant to be an episode in the middle that was just offbeat, that sometimes we allow ourselves in the same way that the PP tape episode or the Melania divorce both came in the middle of the season and were just oddball shows. This was meant to be that, and then of course we had to shut down filming because of the pandemic, and suddenly it became the bookend.
I kind of think what we're going for is how tempting Pizzagate view of the world is. That conspiracy theories are this kind of, there's an undertow to them that draw you in because you think you are seeing the unseen thing or solving the thing that no one else has solved. And part of it was that, but part of it was the oddball nature of who Epstein was, and a person who was connected to so much power was given things. Given one of the most expensive mansions in Manhattan, just because, and because he probably had some secret info on people in there, it just seemed like all those oddball elements thrown together into kind of a parody of a procedural, and then throw in Citizen Kane, and it felt like a natural. Why wouldn't you do it?
And of course, it did fit in thematically with this idea of somebody who was meant to go to the police every 90 days.
Every 90 days.
And just didn't. And that seemed to be fine. Like no consequences. It's still, I don't understand how that happens.
And the problem of the show is it really brings such cynicism to the public that you do have less respect for the law. If other people don't have to obey the law, and no consequences come from it, everybody else is alleviated of their concern of obeying the law, and that is the end of civilization. So yeah, we're going after the end of civilization. What are the school marms in all this?
Well, I think we need a school mom view from this, because it's so inexplicable at how these certain people just do not follow the rule of the law like everybody else. And that's why Memo 618, which is maybe nonsense, but with an inexplicable view, you kind of try to explain it in some way. So is that where Memo 618 ultimately came from? And will that continue on for future seasons?
Well, yes, because as the show points out, it's not purely a function of this administration. So even if Biden wins in November, it is seeming, along with the Office of Legal Counsel and its tendency to create what we would call secret law, but law that allows a president and an administration to act outside of written law. It is a concern for our civilization. It's just the Trump administration has used it probably more than anyone. So we'll go on. And we were just doing the Joseph Heller thing of bureaucracy has a tendency to give a number to something and it becomes a fact as if that's something that should be obeyed. So we thought, we'd give a number to this. I don't know what memo 6117 or 615 is, but I'm sure there's something just as nasty there.
Yeah. At the moment, we're obviously dealing with a lot of social upheaval and political upheaval with the Black Lives Matter movement and the protests that we're seeing in the United States. Episode 3 was really prescient and very relevant to what we're dealing with today. That was about the N-word and about reparations, where the whole firm debates the pros and cons of those particular issues. Talk us through the genesis of that episode and what you were aiming for.
Well, Davida Scarlett is one of our writers, and she was always interested in doing an episode about reparations and a debate about reparations and seeing how African Americans' viewpoints of it is not monolithic and that there could be an interesting debate. And we were interested in the Walter Mosley situation with Star Trek on All Access, where he used the N-word in quoting a racist. And someone blew the whistle on the human resources, so then there was this ghastly image of an African American being taken onto the carpet for using N-word, even though he was not the one saying it, he was quoting somebody. And so we want to combine those two ideas into a story that was when you kind of don't control your own fate. And here there's a law firm that has acquired us and is our bosses, in a sense, this African American law firm, and they are over us and they're controlling our fate. And so the Democrat committee hires our African American firm to discuss what are the issues that they think will bring back African American voters into the 2020 election, and that it moves towards reparation. And then because Delroy's character, Adrian Bozeman, quotes a story using the N-word, suddenly someone blows the whistle on him to HR, and so HR is brought in. It's meant to be a complicated view about not having the power yourself.
And hopefully when you're watching it and you're watching that scene where Bozeman is talking about what Vernon Jordan had said, that scene just goes by you, so that hopefully the audience is just as stunned when he's called into HR as Bozeman is.
Which is interesting because we had Vernon Jordan on the show last season, and so he's quoting a story that Vernon Jordan ad-libbed for the camera, by the way, last season. So that was not scripted, we just did. So it was meant to be a few things at the same time.
It reminded me as well that this show is really good at looking at things from a macro level, but also on a smaller scale. You're very good at portraying corporate life. I worked in a law firm for many years. I know what it's like in the corporate world. So you do that very well. For example, you mentioned the HR thing. That is very accurate. When you're dealing with they're usually mindless drones who are just focused on their particular outcome that they need to get. Also, there's a great sequence in episode 7 when the senior partners are looking at the people in the office with X's and salaries over their heads because they need to make layoffs. And that is 100% accurate because everyone becomes a list and a number, and it's all about the almighty dollar. Where does that insight come from?
Again, I think Michelle's right. A writer's room that is very good. Everybody reads everything. We don't have to go that far in CBS to see what Synergy is doing to people we like within the company that are being fired left and right. I mean, the difficulty is this kind of corporate speak that makes what is really an awful thing, which is firing people, make it sound like a lovely thing like Synergy. It sounds almost like cinnamon. Cinnamon, it's time for cinnamon. It was really, the upstairs people are very much like, this is a great time, we're doing this, we're doing it. And it really comes down to dollars and cents and people being treated as, objectively as people who are just numbers.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I also really enjoyed episode 4. That was the Cocksuckers in Chains play. Diane in a dominatrix outfit. Like, you can't really lose Audra and Hugh dancing the interracial relationship where they're both kind of not sure what the hell they're doing. We start to see a different side of the characters. And again, as you mentioned earlier, some of their comic timing is so brilliant. I mean, Christine Baranski is an Emmy winner for her work at Sybil, so she knows what she's doing on comedy. Did you enjoy mixing it up a bit and doing something a bit risque and fun on that episode?
Absolutely. We enjoyed it, but we were also very lucky that the actors were game. Because, that was a far step.
And Audra, I think, was very funny in that episode. I think what was fun, it is based or is inspired by Slave Play, a New York play. And everybody in the room had seen it, and everybody had conversations about what they wanted to do about it. But it was a really good, lighter version of what the show can do. Even though each show meant to have a lot of comedy, that one was supposed to be one of the lighter because the issues aren't as life-threatening and, tearing down the world issues.
And it was certainly a kick to see Audra's doppelganger sing.
Yeah, it reminded me that she's a multiple Tony winner and she can really belt out a tune. And when I spoke to Daniel Lawson, your costume designer, he mentioned how Christine's really game to put on that outfit. I'm glad she did because it was a bit of an eye-opener in more ways than one. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that episode 5 is to me was like a throwback to the best Good Wife episodes that we ever got, and that was the military tribunal. We had Linda Emond as the judge, brilliant performance as a guest on your show. War crimes, US involvement in the Middle East. I felt like I was watching The Good Wife again. Do you enjoy doing those really good, succinct courtroom dramas? Because we don't get a lot of them these days.
Really, the reason to go back to military court is that we love Linda Emond so much.
Yes.
I mean, that's the justification for it. That's the lure for us.
They're hard. We kind of like them, but we also feel a little trapped by them. What's cool is when you're at military court and all these uniforms are lined up, it's a really cool look. It's a very, what was the Sorkin? It's A Few Good Men. There's a great uniform look to it, because otherwise I think courtroom looks a little ugly. But I thought what was cool was trying to do something that the language leads. There's not as much visual excitement. And then in today's day, what is interesting is you'll see this now about the military and what's going on with the current administration. We love the idea of whether an underling always has to obey orders, or are they thinking and can they trump or get around law or orders that they consider are breaking the law or unconstitutional. And that was the premise of that. And you're seeing it played out now, obviously, with the photo op at the church and the Bible. It's just, you're seeing this question among the military: have they been asked to cross the line from being, defenders of the public to people who are there as part of the political cause of the president?
Yeah, and I think we're going to see so much more of that over the next couple of years as people start to take stock into what's been happening over the last 3 or 4 years. You mentioned that the season was cut short by the pandemic, understandably. Disappointingly, though, because we still had 3 episodes that we could have devoured. Can you explain maybe what we missed out on, or are you going to just put that into season 5? And if so, what are you going to tackle? What are you going to do in season 5? The pandemic, Black Lives Matter? You've got plenty of things to do.
Well, I will only say that we were going to show there was a cult within the Office of Legal Counsel, because we start the year we try to start the year in some version of reality and then get a little more absurd with each episode. And it was going to be a little bit like Apocalypse Now, that we end up in the Office of Legal Counsel and head to this dark room at the end, and it's Bill Barr in the way Marlon Brando was in Apocalypse Now, pouring water and explaining what's going on. So this year was going to head into that kind of level of absurdity. But, to end with that last shot that we have in the current last episode is probably indicative of the year too.
Yeah, I think there's so much to look forward to, and hopefully you can get back to work soon. We all can, actually, properly. And thanks so much for a great season 4. It really was pretty special. We really appreciate your time today.
We had a lot of fun. Thank you.
So good to talk to you.
Now, everybody go to Gold Derby, make your predictions, and click subscribe. We have lots of contender chats just like this one with Robert and Michelle.